And then neshama.
Nefesh, ruach, kavaya, nefesh, rachava, ayin, ruach.
That's the neshama.
Yeah.
The lave.
What do you mean?
Talking about how the lave is the.
The reason the ayin has such a koach is the koach of the neshama. No?
How does that relate? I'm saying, but how does that relate to the lave?
And the lave is the mishkan of the neshama.
Uh-huh.
The lave is the mishkan of the neshama. Like there's a lot of koach in einayim. Like in the secular world, the einayim are just taking in. The chazal, they're putting out, putting forth something. See, Moshe Rabbeinu went to look at Eretz Yisrael.
Rabbi Haber.
Right.
Is it just not a sec? Is there a schedule for the shiur for the summer at all? Do we know yet, or no?
I'm always happy to take a break.
No. That's fine. It was a planned break. Just wanted to know if there was a planned break yet, as well.
No, I haven't thought about it yet. Probably after Tisha B'Av, and I end up going to the States. Before we get back into Reb Tzadok, I just want to finish this sugya of Shimshon as Mashiach. Shimshon Mashiach. Yaakov Avinu thought, Rashi says, that Shimshon was Mashiach. Shimshon came from Shevet Dan, and when he gave the bracha to Dan, he said, Dan Yodin Amoy Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael. And I'm never sure exactly how to read the truck of these things, the punctuation, because you could say Dan Yodin Amoy Ka'achad, that he was Dan Shimshon was a shofet. Rashi says in Pasuk Tezayin, Dan Yodin Amoy Yinkoim Nikmas Amoy Miplishtim. So Yodin is, first of all, he was a shofet. That's the positive shot, but the not so positive shot is Yodin Amoy is the lashon of Nekama. Yodin is also the day of reckoning, right? Dan Yodin Amoy Ka'achad. So Rashi says Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael Al Shimshon Niva Nevuah Zu. This was a nevuah on Shimshon. Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael Kimiyuchad Shemishvatim Shehu David Sheba MiYehuda. That Yaakov Avinu gave credibility to Dan because of Shimshon, as if he was Yehuda. Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael. Or Chazal say, and Targum brings, Dan Yodin Amoy Ka'achad. That Shimshon was mamash like Hashem. Ki Yehuda Shalayla. That Shimshon was like Hashem. How was Shimshon like Hashem? That's something that needs a little bit of a hesper. Ki Yehuda Shalayla. Lashon of Chazal. Yaakov Avinu at the end of the bracha of Dan uncharacteristically says, L'shuascha kivisi Hashem. L'shuascha kivisi Hashem. Nisnava, says Rashi, his nevuah here was, She'inakru plishtim es einav, that the plishtim will blind Shimshon. The Sofa Lomer, and at the end he will say, Zachreinina v'chaskeinina achapa. So just we didn't finish the complete story of Shimshon. We got to the end of the story, Parak Tazayin. We were talking about how Delilah kept on getting him to give over his secrets, even though he knew it was going to kill him. That's a plea out something. He knew it was going to kill him, but he did it anyway. First he tried to trick her, but that didn't work. Then finally, Vayagilas Kaliboy, Vayamila Myra Loyola Roshi, that the secret to my strength is that a razor has never passed over my head. My physical strength comes from the fact that I was always a Nazir. If you will shave me, I will lose my koyach. I'll just be like every other person. So the koach of Shimshon was, he was Megala to Delilah, apparently stupidly, that he's going to, if you cut my hair off, I'm like everybody else. And Delilah saw that it seems to be the truth. Let's try it one more time, the Plishtim said, because this time it sounds like he's telling the truth. They came, they paid off Delilah for her valuable information. She called the man, she shaved him, and Shimshon became weak. He didn't realize he was weak. The Plishtim grabbed him, nabbed him, they were able to blind him. That was permanent. And they took him down to Aza. They kidnapped him, blinded him, took him down to Aza. Sounds familiar,
sounds
right?
like today, right?
Yeah. Bin Chushtayim. They put him in handcuffs. What they didn't realize is that the hair started to grow back. Kasher Gulach. Meantime, the Plishtim were worshipping Dagon, which was their big avodah zarah. They had a big simcha over the fact that it's important to keep in mind here that the whole Plishtim occupation of Eretz Yisrael was intimidated by one man. The one man was Shimshon. Not the Chazal, or not the Chachamim, or not the Tzava. They were intimidated by one guy, Shimshon. They captured Shimshon. It's a holiday to Dagon. By Euros on by Yahalu Eseliheim, Ki Amr Nosan Elihenu Biyadenu, Esrevenu, Veismacher Bartzenu, that their God, they said, our God put our enemy in our hand, he who is destroying our land, Vasher Hirbas Chalalenu, who's beating our soldiers. Vayihiki toiv libam, vayomer kiru l'shimshon v'yisachek lanu. Let Shimshon come and entertain us. Vayikru l'shimshon v'beis. Let's make fun of him also. Vayikru l'shimshon v'beis asurim. They brought him up from jail. Vayitzachek lifnei v'yamidu oisei ben ha'amudim, and they tied him up to two pillars. Vayomer Shimshon el hanar hamachzik biyadei. There was a nar that was leading him because he was blind, and he said, Hanicha oisi. Mishenius Hamudim, let me feel the pillars. Asher Abayis Nachan Aleim, take me dafka, meaning Rashi explains, take me dafka not to any pillars, but take me to the pillars which is holding up the house here. Showing Aleim, let me lean on them. Abayis Maleha Nashim V'Nashim V'Shamachol Sarnei Plishtim. Everybody was there. All the big shots were there in this house. V'Alagag, and on the roof alone was Kishloishus Halofim Ish. There were 3,000 people on the roof. Ish v'isha haroim b'schech Shimshon. They all called gladiators, right? They all came to see Shimshon, the fall of Shimshon. So everybody came, big festivity. Vayikra Shimshon al Hashem. And at this moment, Shimshon's holding on to the pillars of the building, and Shimshon called out to Hashem, Vayomar, and he said, Hashem Elokim, Zochreini no. Remember me. V'chaskeni no. Achapam. Give me koach one more time. Achapam hazeh halikim. V'nokma nekam achas mishtei einai miplishtim. Mishtei einai miplishtim. And let me take one more nekama from the plishtim. Mishtei einai. Why is he saying stay a night?
Revenge for the two eyes of those.
Revenge. Yovesh Einai, it says here. Shtei Einai. Okay. Vayilpos Shimshon Shnei Amudei. So that was his tefillah. Zachreinina Chaskenina Achapam. Zachreinina. Like I messed up. Let me do it one more time. Vayilpos Shimshon Shnei Amudei HaTavech. Yilpos means he grabbed the two amudim of there were the two supporting pillars, asher abayis nachain aleim, which the whole house was leaning on, was holding on. Vayisamech aleim echad biyaminai ve'echad b'smailai vayomer. And this is the second thing that said. Shimshon said, this we don't have a song for. Tamois nafshi im plishtim. Tamois nafshi im plishtim. Let me die with the plishtim. In other words, this was a suicide attack on the plishtim. Chaskenina, give me the koach. Let me grab these pillars. Let me bring them down. And famously, Tamais nafshi im plishtim. Vayet b'koach. Vayipol habayis al hasronim v'al kol ha'am asher bai. He brought down the house, and it fell down on everybody that was there. Vayiyu amesim asher hemis v'moisei rabim me asher hemis b'chayav. He killed more at that one time, at that one moment, more plishtim than he killed all of his life. Vayerdu echa v'chol beis avihu vayisu ois aviyalu v'yikru oisai bein Sarah bein Ashtal. His brothers came, they found Shimshon amongst the pile, they took him, they buried him, bein Sarah bein Ashtal on Route 38. The kever manoach aviv, v'hu shafat es Yisrael esrim shana. Great story about a shofet. Shimshon ben Manoach, that was the story. Now, Yaakov thought, let's review this again. Yaakov thought that he was Mashiach. Yeshuascha kivisi Hashem, say Chazal, that once he saw that he died, he saw he's not Mashiach. As I said last week, we have a clear raya, Mashiach can't die. That takes care of half the false Mashiachs. Or all of them.
All of them.
They all die, right? Maybe. Who shafat is Yisrael asrim shana? It's not the, just want to point out here, it's not the Mashiach that we're used to thinking about, is it? What's the Mashiach that we're used to thinking about is not a military gibor. The Mashiach that we're used to thinking about is, I think, the sage, tzaddik, Talmud Chacham. It's always fascinated me that Rabbi Akiva thought that it was time for Mashiach. Why did he pick Bar Kokhba? Why didn't he pick himself? Rabbi Akiva was a tzaddik ador, he was a gadol ador. You think the Hasidim say the Rebbe is Mashiach. Rabbi Akiva was a Rebbe, he wasn't Mashiach. Mashiach is if Yaakov Avinu thought that Shimshon was Mashiach, so then Mashiach must have a military, at least aspect to him. So the emes is that I believe in Chazal and Eicha Rabbah. It sounds like that when we once looked into this according to the Yerushalmi, that when Rabbi Kiva's machlokas with his colleagues at his time, whether Bar Kokhba was Mashiach, the other one says Yalu Yisavim Alachoya, let grass grow on his cheeks and he won't be Mashiach, meaning he's going to die. He's going to be pushing daisies and stuff. So he can't be Mashiach. Rabbi Kiva thought he was Mashiach. So Rabbi Kiva's according to Chazal, Rabbi Kiva learned that the way I think that the two things he learned from Shimshon. One is that Mashiach is a military force. That's one thing. And so it wasn't him. It wasn't his brothers in Chazal. It wasn't Rabbi Shua. He came Bar Kokhba. That was one thing he saw. It was Bechiddush in Mashiach. I don't know where we lost it a little bit. The other thing he understood about Mashiach is, and he said, Dain Malka Mashiach. That's the lashon of Rabbi Kiva. He says, this man is Mashiach. Also, there's no indication anywhere that I know of that that Bar Kochba came from Shevet Yehuda. I don't know if anybody claimed that Bar Kochba came from, that he was a Ben David or came from Shevet Yehuda. Nevertheless, Rabbi Kiva came and said that Bar Kochba could be Mashiach. So some are Mataritz, he meant Mashiach ben Yosef. By the way, just I got while I'm here, the whole Rabbi Kiva, I pointed out on Shabbos morning that you see in this parsha in Polak that Moshe Rabbeinu stepped aside to let Bilam talk. Like virtually the whole parsha, except for the last few psukim in the story, is all, there's no Moshe there, it's all Bilam, like nothing. Like the whole Torah is Moshe, and here's Torah's Bilam. It's like an interesting thing. And you see Chazal studied the parsha of Bilam, the words of Bilam, the Mashalim of Bilam, the Nevuah of Bilam. They studied the parsha of Bilam just like they studied the parsha of Moshe Rabbeinu. And we see that Bilam was not just a cursor, or a magician, but he was a visionary for the future also, because he said, Dorach Kochav Meyakov, that a star will come forth Meyakov. And Rabbi Kiva, the Talmidov, studied this very, very carefully, and from there they learned that Bar Kochba was Mashiach. Bar Kochba, Dorach Kochav Meyach. That's where he learned it from. So that all coming from Bilam. So it wasn't even just that we could learn out of halacha. Like people say, well, how do we learn? Why do we say Matovu Allah Yaakov? Mashiach. The whole hint in the Chumash that Rabbi Kiva could find was from Parshas Bilam. So he was studying Parshas Bilam. So interesting where things come from the places you don't expect them to come. So the whole thing came from Bilam, Dorach Kochav Yaakov. And then there's another very, very important good I want to say that we learn from. In other words, from a potential Mashiach, the Rambam learns from Bar Kochba what Mashiach could be. Because even if Rabbi Kiva was wrong, like Yaakov Avinu was wrong, and Akiva is a Gilgal of Yaakov, hence had the same name, and the Arizal, of course, says that Bar Kochba was a Gilgal of Shimshon, of course. But you see something here. You see that where Chazal say that he was done Yodin Amoy Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael. That done will be done Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael, like Ki Yechudei Shel Olam, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean to be done like HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What if we just read the story of Shimshon twice? What do we see in here that he was done Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Right, you with me on this question? Where did we? He was a military giant. He was the thing with Shimshon was that you see Minam Mikra that he was Dan Yechidi. He was independent, completely independent. Shimshon didn't have an army. He didn't have the organized people behind him. In fact, they were against him. They said, you're causing problems with the Plishtim. They tried to turn him over to the Plishtim. He was a Baal Koach. He was a Nazir Hashem, the Shofet Yisrael. But most importantly, he was Dan Yechidi, Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Dan Yechidi, Af Shimshon, Dan Yechidi. Soita Dav Yud Amral. Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Dan Yechidi. Something parenthetically very, very important here. The Musar, I think that has to be learned. We're supposed to emulate Hashem. Mahu Rachum, Fatati Rachum. So he's about Chesed. We should do Chesed. We're supposed to emulate Hashem. Why should we emulate Hashem? We're not Hashem. Okay, we're created in the Tzelem Elokim, but so the pshat is, if you look into this deeply, it all comes from Mahu Dan Yechidi Afa'ato Dan Yechidi. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a Yachid, we are a Yachid. means to say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, I don't know how much we know about God, but one thing we know about God is that we need others, He doesn't need anything. Completely independent. So the workings of Hashem in this world, the Bria, He may have chosen to take Malachim, He may have chosen to create people, but He doesn't need anything, He doesn't need anybody, It's a total independence. In order to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have, to be a Rachum and a Chanun and an Erech Apayim and a Rav Chesed, so the background to all that is that He's completely independent. When you're completely independent of everything, there's no considerations. There's no political considerations that have to be made. I can do whatever I want. I'm independent. So therefore, it's possible to be a Rachum and a Chanun and an Erech Apayim. So the pshat in a person, a human being Domet HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is that we have to be on some level completely independent. You with me on this?
Independent of who?
Of anything. Einoid Milvadoi. I can be dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously, but in terms of this world, that's it. I don't have any other shibutim.
But who can start doing that other than Shimshon and Nazir? Like the Nazir, it seems like the Naziris is like allowing that complete focus.
Nazirus is separating him
right
from the world. Exactly right. So
how when we're involved with the noise in there, how could we possibly not be distracted and involved in the world? And I'm saying it's a huge challenge.
We can do it. So codependency is out. Meaning that, like there's, like if you think about it, we've created a life where we're so dependent on so many other people. Let's talk about people. We're so dependent on so many people. If you're holding by Einod Milvado, it doesn't make any difference with anybody. Okay, we're cooperating and we're working together and dependent. Somech. Right? You can't be somech on nadivim. Al tivtuchu b'nadivim. B'ven adam she'en lo yeshua. Even people we love, we're dependent on them. We become dependent. We become dependent on our spouses. We become dependent on our children. We become dependent on our employers. Dependent. And Shimshon, interestingly, worked alone. He worked alone. This was what Dan Yadin Amoy Ka'achad. That's the drasha. What does it mean, Ka'achad? Ki Yechudei Shel Olam. Not just that he worked alone, but he worked alone like Hashem works alone. It's possible to be so tied in to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, put me in this world. It really doesn't make any difference what anybody else says, what anybody else does. Everybody knows the famous Nefesh HaChaim that at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, no matter who's oppressing me, or no matter who's pulling me, or no matter what direction I'm being pressured to go in, to physically, politically, the fact of the matter is, my kavana, the Gemara says, the Nefesh HaChaim brings the Gemara in Brachos, if my kavana is Einoid Milvadoi, I really don't have to do anything but the right thing, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of it. I really don't have to do anything. It's a fiction.
It seems like for Shimshon it was to a fault a little bit. The fact he married Kushi women, he didn't listen to everybody else. And
that was his downfall. His downfall was his dependence. That was the whole thing. His downfall was his dependence. Look at this. Look at Adam Arisha. Hashem's Yitzir Kappa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Like mamash the creation. If not for Chava, he would have been completely independent. Obviously, nobody else around to depend on. It was him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The downfall was with Chava Ishta. I'm not knocking Chava Ishta. I'm just telling you. It's a chumash. The downfall was the Chava Ishta. Not that Chava was any worse than Adam or anything like that. The point was that you were meant to be completely independent. You should be operating as a gibor. If you're operating as a gibor, it's difficult for a weak guy like me to even talk about this. But I know one thing, that to the extent of one's gevura is the extent of one's siyata d'shmaya and hatzlacha in this world. The moment one is an eved to pressure, to money, to women, to environmental things, even to one's comfort, the minute one's an eved to that, you're dependent. Right? Dependent. So you punch his ear and you say, "Avodah, right? Avodahem loy avodim la'avodim." You have to be an eved of HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'zehu. So when you talk about that's us. It's ad kedei kach. The Pachad Yitzchak speaks this out, Arichos, that you can't be a Rachum, you can't be a Chanun, you can't if you're not completely independent. Now the trick of it is to be independent and still be able to work with people. We see that in Shimshon. He was saving Klal Yisrael. What was going on here in Eretz Yisrael at this time? Our oppressors were the Plishtim. They were trying to get Klal Yisrael. They were trying, as they said, he was taking away Artsenu. They looked at it as their Aretz. Exactly the same thing that was going on with Rabbi Akiva. There was Romans, the time of the Hadrian decrees that were Koveshes Artsenu. They were taking over Artsenu. We need to become independent of the Plishtim. We need to become independent of the Romans. So Rabbi Akiva clearly looked at Shimshon and he saw Bar Kochba. To him, all the different things that we're looking at in Mashiach, it could be that what we need to look at is the Chumash, more than anything else, Don Yadinamai Ka'achad. And then there's what's it called? Mercha. Ka'achad. Saranas Nachta, Don Yadinamai Ka'achad. Shlit'a Yisrael. So he was done ki Yechud Yisrael. Chazal. We're talking on a number of levels here, but one level is the level of Mashiach. Mashiach has to be like Hashem. Another level is the level Pachad Yitzchak speaks about, is we talk about us. We have to be on the level of Hashem. Mahu rachum afato tiyarachum. How do you do it? Independence. You can feel it, by the way. I guess we all suffer from some codependency somewhere along the line. Maybe we call it love. We have all kinds of different names for it. Codependency, where the way I understand it, I'm not a psychologist, but the way I understand it is that our behavior is being somehow like when you're dependent on a drug. So if you're an addict, it's not just like you need to have this drug or alcohol or even coffee. Your whole life revolves around it. Like everything revolves around. Like when you're planning your vacation, you're thinking about. At least I'm thinking about like, okay, we're going to go to Missouri and we're going to stay in this luxury hotel and we're going to tour here. But where am I going to get my coffee? Like it's part of the plan. The addiction and the dependency. Everything revolves around that dependency. When a person's dependent on another human being, when there's a codependency, your whole life revolves around it. So that's not an Eved Hashem. It can't be an Eved Hashem. So when Yaakov looked at Shimshon, he saw Mashiach. And similarly, it wasn't so much, I think, I'm just saying it wasn't so much the military aspect of Shimshon that Rabbi Akiva saw, although that was, so he didn't even have weapons, just a jawbone. That was what he was doing. All his business was with a jawbone. So interesting. But it wasn't. He was tied into one thing. Nazir Hashem, Nazir mi beten. I'm a holy person. What was his downfall? Delilah. Delilah means downfall. That's what it means. It was this one dependency on this one woman, and you see how made him like Meshuggah. Tell me the secret if you love me so I can kill you. Makes no sense at all, but that's what dependency is. That's what addiction is. That's what it is. Nothing less than a clear addiction. So now Chazal look at this and they say, whoa, is this what happened with David HaMelech? Somehow wasn't this his downfall? The same thing. We're talking about the biggest tzaddikim in history. We're talking about the Balei Moisim and Gibar, Shalom HaMelech. We're talking about so what is it about these Mashiachs? What is it about these Mashiachs that they keep on tripping up with the same thing? The answer is because the Nisayan of Mashiach is dependency, or independency. That is the Nisayan of Mashiach. It says, as Chazal say, tell me if this is a good drasha. Shem Shimshon Kishem Hashem. Where do you see the Shem Hashem? Gemara, we're inside. Where do you see the Shem Hashem and Shimshon? Where's the gematria here? Shem Shimshon Kishem Hashem. Says the Gemara, Kishem Shumogein Hashem Elokim. Because you see that Hashem is Kishemesh, Shimshon. You see Hashem is like the sun, not Kasher Hashem, the sun. So the sun, the moon is dependent. The moon is not lit up unless the sun's shining on it. The sun, the sun, say Hashemesh B'Gvuras. The Shemesh is a complete independence. What are we saying when we say Kiddush Levana? That the time should come. This is our tefillah. The time should come that the Or Levana should be like the Or Hachama. Or Levana, Klal Yisrael, Daimel Levana. But we're dependent always. We're in a situation of dependency. That's not Mashiach. But in order for there to be a messianic situation, there has to be independent. If we're dependent on this one for oil, and this one for weapons, and this one for this, and that one for that, that's not Mashiach. It's okay. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, but it's not Mashiach. So, and then again, I don't want to lose the personal part of it. Is who can really be a shemesh? Who can really be a shemesh? Who can walk around giving off light, not being needy all the time, and taking everyone around you? Like it's terrible if somebody is teaching and needs the shevach. Everybody likes, but that needs the shevach of everybody around them. Or am I the shemesh? Or am I the levana? If a person is a leader, so then you can't be the pnei hadar pnei hakelav. You can't be dependent on other things, right? Like Rabbi Haber says that the dog is always looking back to see who's my leader.
Yeah.
Pnei hadar pnei hakelav. You can't lead based on what people are telling you to lead. It's not something that's going to happen. So that's not mashichi. You can't have a Medina which is mashichi, it's independent. So Shimshon Mashiach. And Rabbi Kiva said Bar Kochba was Mashiach. Whether he was or he wasn't, the Rambam learns all the halachas from Bar Kochba. Is it militarily? Maybe. Is it ideologically? Maybe. Kabbalistically? Maybe. It doesn't make any difference as long as it's independent. It'll be mofia in every generation the way it's supposed to be. At that point, we were looking at occupation of the Romans. So it was all about military. And even though I always say that, wow, like Rabbi Kiva created a whole Sahal there with Bar Kochba, with Lokatuf. It doesn't say that he did. People helped him. I guess he had an army, people helped him, but he was an independent warrior until he fell. And why did he fall? Say Chazal, Gaiva. What's Gaiva? Dependency. Gaiva is I need to other people to kind of worship me.
Now our generation we have the credit card bill and the mortgage.
Go ahead, explain.
I'm saying the illusion that one is dependent on the lifestyle one needs to have. It doesn't even have to be opulent.
Right.
One needs to have, and then one becomes subservient to that.
I had this discussion yesterday with just a personal thing with one of my children, and what's called spoiled. Such a bad word. It's spoiled. It's a piece of cheese. It's spoiled. It's a weird word, isn't it? A strange word, spoiled. Strong. You're spoiled. It's a terrible thing to say to a kid. You're spoiled. Like rotten milk, stinks. What's the spoiled? But I mean, what's the concept, anyways? Forget the word for a second. There must be a better word than funak. Must be somebody's used to having good things and really can't do doesn't do very well. Doesn't have the sort of luxuries that they're accustomed.
Entitled might be a better word.
Yeah, like a magiali type of thing.
Or pampered.
Pampered. Actually, like entitled. It's a good word. The nakuda of this is an interesting thing. I think I'm right about this. That the Rambam says that it's an usher should act like an usher, and a Beinoni should act like a Beinoni, and an Ani should act like an Ani. Meaning, it's ugly. The Rambam writes in Hilda's Day. It's ugly for an usher to act like an Ani. I always have this problem with these takanas that you're not allowed to make nice weddings. Why shouldn't an usher make a nice wedding? If you're an usher, give everyone a good time. Or throw a party. What the heck? Why? For an usher for a real usher, to make a wedding, which is serving kiffelach and herring, and so an usher. So Rambam says an usher, everyone should live according to their standard. If you're living according to the standard of something else, that's ugly. What the problem is, it's ugly when an usher lives like an ani. It's ridiculous when an ani lives like an usher. It's all be comfortable with what you are and where you are. That's this is my status. This is what I could afford. This is what I can do. And this is the party I'm going to throw. So you talk about spoiled or entitled or pampered or mefunak in any way. The issue is not what you do and what you don't do. It's what you need. What do you need? You have a kid say, "Look, I just can't use a regular cell phone anymore. It just has to. I can't. I need either an Nexus or an iPhone or some type of a smart." Well, you can't. I mean, you can't. For hundreds of years, people have been using regular cell phones. You can't. What's the? So the issue is. As far as I'm concerned, I love driving nice cars. Need is a whole different sugya, of needing. So the point is, what has a relationship? Beautiful, you have a relationship. Dependency is when you need that in order to survive. So there's a new thing to strive for. We don't talk about it enough. Is independence. Independence is being godly, to have that strength. There's a tremendous koach of rachum, chanun, erachim, tzedakah, tremendous koach that comes with being like Hashem. He doesn't need anybody, not totally on anybody.
The Rav is saying that the more independent that it will be possible to think the opposite. That if we have a relationship that's codependent, I can be a rachum to you. It's the opposite, and I think that's very powerful.
You know why? Why is it the opposite?
Because if I don't need you, I can probably care for you.
Right, and if I'm doing it out of codependency, I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me.
So it's not really rachum.
Right. I'm not rachum, I'm just self-satisfying.
I'm not being a nice guy, but I still need it for myself.
Right. It's such a darkistic thing, but the difference, as you say, powerful. The difference is night and day. Real rachum is when I don't need to do anything for you, I'm doing it out of rachum. Real chesed is, it's
a chesed Shabbos, a very...
Right. Otherwise, you know what it is? I always call it, I'm sorry for going on a tangent, just so it's on my mind. But I always call it political. What does political mean? A good person does a chesed. You need a chesed, you need some money, here's some money. A political person says, I'm going to help this guy out because this way, it'll come a time that I'm going to need your help and you'll help me back, or if I help you, so-and-so will be impressed, or like a million risagana for tirutzimai. It's got a million cheshbonos why you're doing something good. Just do a good thing because it's a good thing. Once a cheshbon is political, that's the ultimate dependency. Political people like Mamish can't stand to be in their Dalit Amos. Every single thing they're doing, if I do this for him, that'll do that for me, and I'll do that with that. Who can even hold cup to all the different politics of how it's supposed to be? These are people who are considered very smart. Now, you have to be very smart. It's like Shakranim have to be very smart because you got to remember so much. Like what did I say last time? Like, if you're Emes, you don't have to have a good memory. You just say the Emes each time. You don't need a good memory to be Emes. You don't have to be smart to be Emes. You just have to be Emes. And so, like all of this. So you take a Shimshon, couldn't care less. Rabbi Kiva, Bar Kochba couldn't care less. They just couldn't care. They wanted to please Hashem. They ain't no Novada. We always talk over. It's Kedai to mention a million times. The Briskerov was running away from the Nazis with his sons, Beryl, Reb David, Reb Fall, Arabain. I went by Reb Soloveitchik. I heard the story from him. He was running away from the Nazis. They went on this ride on that horse and this carriage and this, this jeep, this hitchhike, the way they were running. He told his sons the whole time, just have to think the entire time, Ein Oid Movadai. As long as you're thinking Ein Oid Movadai, nothing can happen, and it was miraculous how they got through Machsom after Machsom, and just miracle after miracle. You hear the stories that the Briskers tell about this trip. I think what they were doing is trying to get from Shlit'a to Switzerland. And that was the once you're in Switzerland, they were a little bit more safe, right? Switzerland's a great place. So this was the whole one Machsom. They got stuck. And they were questioning, they took them down, they frisked them, and they thought that was the end. And then they were miraculously saved. And the Briskerov turned to his sons and says, somebody was not thinking Einod Movada. Which one was it? You don't want the Briskerov to look at you like this. I'm telling you, I'm just imagining, I always told a story that I came for a wedding here from America. I came for a wedding, they called me as an aide. And Reb David Soloveitchik, Shlit'a, was Masadar Kedushin. I didn't have a kasher Reb David Soloveitchik, Beryl Soloveitchik. So he didn't know me. He called me for an aide. I've been 100 times an aide. Reb David Soloveitchik looks at his glasses. He looks at me from top to bottom, like a X-ray scan. It must have taken 20 minutes. I think it took about 30 seconds, but it felt like 20 minutes of scan. The whole place is silent, checking out my neshama, my leiv, my boach, my yiras shamayim, everything. And then he puts his glass on and he says, the aid is kosher. I was like, can I get it in writing? Can I get it in writing? The brisker cook. So the brisker Rav is looking at his children. He says somebody was not thinking Novada. Somebody was worried about Nazis. Somebody was worried about guards. Somebody was worried about the flat tire. Somebody was worried about you. You weren't thinking Hashem. The Ein Oid Novada is a person. So I got like Rabbi Nachman writes that Teres HaMashiach, that Teres HaMashiach, which he said on himself that he was Megala, a new kind of Teres HaMashiach. Okay. He said is when I don't have to really think about anything else except for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't have to think about anything else. Everything is just about everything that's going on. Whether it's doctors, enemies, guns, terror, whatever it might be. It's all about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Teres HaMashiach. That's what he writes. He writes that at the beginning. He says that's what his whole that's all the Teres Breslov is Teres HaMashiach. Just think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It gets to a point of a little bit almost impractical, but it's ad kedei kach, the independence Shebadaper. So let's just do a line or two.
Diane has to be independent also.
Right. We need to find out what the Mishnah means when it said Al tihi dan yechidi ke'ein dan yechidi ela echad. Dan yadin amay ke'echad. We need to reconcile those two ideas. Al tihi dan yechidi.
It's interesting. Dan is next to in the formation, and you always would think that Yehuda is going to give such a good influence to Dan who's in the back, who needs to be lifted up, he's all the way in the back, put him next to Yehuda, and maybe it's lehefech. The Don has such a focus on Don Yechidi, and Yehuda's needs that chizuk in order to become...
The other way around.
Yeah, other way around.
Don is about independence. That's what I learned here today.
Justice is very independent.
Independent justice. Yizanik min Abosham. He's the water supply of Eretz Yisrael. The Banyas. The Yarden in Kabbalah. The Yarden is the Zachar. The Kinneret is Nekeva. Check it out. Yarden. People name their kids Yarden. Wrong. Yarden is Zachar. The Kinneret is Nekeva. The Kinneret is Mekabel the Mayim from the Yarden. The Yarden Dan. Yorad Dan is the Zachar. For years, I'm wondering, but the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan was going swimming in the Yarden, and he met Reish Lakish. Famous Gemara, right? Reish Lakish was a bandit. Rabbi Yochanan was a tzaddik. And Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, what a meeting! Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So, what do you do, or what do I do? Like, get out of the pool fast, run. Like, there's this guy. Rabbi Yochanan engaged him in conversation. It was Makar of him. So I'm always wondering, like they both lived all the way up in Tveria. What were they doing with the Yarden? The Yarden is another, to go swimming, you can go swimming in the Kinneret, or they're going swimming in the, 40, 50 kilometers down the road. So they have to go all the way south on 90 in order to go swimming. We'll go swimming in the Kinneret, we'll go swimming in the Yarden. The Omek HaDavar is that this was a Mashiach conversation. It had to do with the Gavrus, the Gevura of Rabbi Yochanan, and the Gevura of Reish Lakish, and they're comparing Gevuros. And what does Rabbi Yochanan, what does Reish Lakish say to Rabbi Yochanan? He says, "Your beauty is wasted. Use it for women." And what does Rabbi Yochanan say to Reish Lakish? Chelcha, loy. It's all about dependence and independence. That's what it's all about. Mashiach is all about dependence and independence. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish brought Torah back to Eretz Yisrael. That's what they were doing, bringing Torah back from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael after the Churban. It was all about this creating an independent state of being that could be called Mashiach. And that was Shimshon, that was Bar Kochba, that was Reish Lakish. That was what it was all about. Chelcha loy raisa. Your whole koach has to be not ladashin, but loy raisa, no codependency. Okay, we'll continue.